Well, hello again. Don here again. Subject of my videos, psychotherapy, help or hazards. I have 3 or 4 videos dealing with some basics about counseling and psychotherapy, some precautions, some specifics, some things to avoid, some things to look for. And I'm not dealing with any notes. I'm dealing off the top of my head, which may mean it doesn't mean much at all. But my subject today is to get into a bit more into the details of depression. One of the major reasons that people seek out mental health care. And I would point out from the outset that a person who is in a state of depression really requires comprehensive mental health evaluation. And by that I mean it not necessarily, but most likely, that a social work counselor or a psychologist counselor or a mental health counselor might not be quite enough in the way of an evaluation procedure. And an evaluation medically, and that might mean by a psychiatrist or even a general medical practitioner, would be highly recommended, if indeed not necessary. And I'll point out a couple of basic things. Some very basic differences in types of depression. And for example, not only depression, but just mood changes. The most severe form of extreme mood changes is a mental illness, and actually a mental/physical illness called bipolar disorder. Those people are stricken usually with extreme measures of elation and activity levels that sometimes are just over the top. They don't know what they're doing, stealing. I mean, there was an example of a woman who in a manic state stole a police car, kept it for 3 days. When she finally got tired and went into depression, pulled the car over, put on the siren lights and fell asleep in the back seat. And from that point on went into a stage of very deep depression requiring not only jail time but psychiatric care in a hospital. Those are the extremes. Some extremes, people have only a severe extreme depressed state, and the fear there and the danger there is that a severe depressed state can bring a person to questioning the value of life. And some who question the value of life question whether or not they should take their own life. Of course, for some people that it cannot enter their mind. For some people, on various grounds, religious, whatever, family. But some days that you might admit, you wake up just feeling, hey, today I really feel on top of the world. Don't know why. You're high stepping, you're feeling good. That's a mild form of euphoria, and I believe that is physiologically based. You either had a few good days of sleep, or your body rhythm is in good sync, or your monthly routine. And by the way, I'm not talking about menstruation, but day-to-day, week-to-week, monthly routines and bodily chemistry change a bit. And there may be other days when you just wake up, oh crap, I'd just rather stay in bed today. So those types of mood swings are examples, I believe, of what are biologically going on in the body. And the reason I'm concerned about persons seeking counseling or therapy for depression is that some in the field of counseling and therapy have little or no background in physiology or biology. It so happened my undergraduate major was medicine, so I'm somewhat sympathetic to biological and medical matters, although I worked for decades as a clinical psychologist. But with all due respect to the need for psychiatric medical consultation. Now let me point out this hazard. Sometimes people say, I'm terribly depressed, I better see a psychiatrist. And chances are that if you go to a psychiatrist and say you're depressed, you will not be evaluated for the various forms of depression. So let me get to that. I already pointed out that depression, even mild forms of depression or elation, can come about because of biological features, changes in your daily routine, whatever is going on in your body. There is a form of depression, severe depression, known as endogenous depression. That is, it's determined to be almost entirely physical. Something has happened to the person physically. They are ill physically. It may be blood chemistry, brain chemistry, neurological chemistry, but their body is, and it could be a very severe form. And the treatments there can go from medications, injections, and you may or may not know that electrochromotherapy is somewhat on a rebound after being years and years of degraded because it was overused. It was overused. But just recently, the wife of a former presidential candidate, and I believe it was Mike Dukakis, points out how electrochromotherapy has kept his wife out of extreme depression now for decades. So that's clearly a medical treatment to be used cautiously, conservatively. Medical pills, antidepressants, cautiously. The problem is this: if you go to a psychiatrist and say you're depressed, I've been feeling bad, I just don't know what, I can't work, I can't do this, and he just slides a prescription across to you, I might suggest walking out of that. If that psychiatrist hasn't gone through what's going on in your life, did something happen to you recently, are you recalling some tragic event from last year that you didn't bring up or go over with? Is something bad happening to a child, a loved one, husband? Are you physically ill and worried and haven't told anybody about it? In other words, the psychological components of depression, if they're not discussed and you just get a simple prescription that comes across the desk, that prescription may or may not help. Oh, I mean, you can get a prescription to just jack you up. I mean, if you get an amphetamine and you're depressed, amphetamine can make everything go away. Or they slide some tranquilizers across the desk, and no matter what in the hell is bothering you, enough tranquilizers just make everything go away. Doesn't solve anything, doesn't solve everything, may not solve much at all. Talked about some other forms of depression which are common, and without talking about my personal experiences, postpartum depression is very common. I believe a person who is, if they're in a woman who has just had a child and is in a solid relationship with a husband or boyfriend or lover or the father of the child, just give it some time. That is a physiological disorder, I believe. That psychological components, just had a child, life is changing, but that type of depression and many others run their course like a cold or a flu or even a broken bone. In 6 weeks will heal. So if you go to a psychologist, mental health counselor, social worker, and there's not a fairly complete review of all the possibilities of the types of depression you might have and the sources of depression you might have, you're in an incomplete type of environment. Social worker, counselor, psychologist, or psychiatrist should review the details, specifics of your depression, its depths, the symptoms related to it, the possible causes of it, and if it's endogenous, by that I mean Nothing happened to me. Everything's going fine in my world. The bottom just fell out. It may be you're physically ill and require medical care principally, and the psychological care or counseling care secondarily, because the depression is now straining your relationship with children, or straining relationship with a loved one, a husband, a lover, a wife, a cousin, an employer. So thorough evaluation is the first step in seeking resolution for depression, and it may involve medication only if carefully been assessed, recommended, and hopefully only for a short time. In the extreme case, electrocoma therapy, it's on its way back. I've seen it done years ago. They stopped it because of it looks so brutal. But some people are doing that. That's not my field at all. It's not for me to say much about that. That is a medical psychiatric practice. Or the practice of an electrician, I guess. So it's not for me to say much about that. I'm just trying to point out the various forms of treatment for depression. So I'm basically here just saying about the assessment, because then the treatment, whether it involves medications, in severe forms of electrocoma, psychological counseling, group counseling, family counseling. That would be the next step. All the sources, available treatment for depression. But going into treatment for depression, keep these things in mind, please. Now, if you will subscribe to my channel here, Don Degley, Psychotherapy, Help or Hazard. There are several others, and there will be more. And I don't work from a script. I work as the thoughts start running through my head. I hope some of them, I hope most of them are kind of clear. Push a like or a don't like button at the bottom of this thing. And my best to you or anyone you know who is seeking mental health care. In this case, for this piece here, for depression. We'll talk about anxieties, treatment of anxieties, agoraphobia in one of the upcoming 10 or 15 minute sessions that I'll do. There are many other things to discuss, and little by little I will. This one is to be labeled Evaluation and Treatment for Depression. Thanks a lot. Again, please subscribe. Push a like or a don't like button, and we'll catch you on the next back end of this thing. Bye-bye.